Doug Repetto, who's a sound artist and musician. I think it was started probably in 2005 or something like that, 5 years ago or so, maybe a little bit longer than that. And the idea behind the group, in New York is sort of full of lots of people doing interesting things with music and art and everything else, as is every city. And as you may or may not know, the sort of DIY culture of building instruments and circuit bending and taking things apart and putting them back together again and incorrectly and all those kinds of things is sort of coming back as a really big movement, and has been for at least the last 5 to 10 years. And please come in. So as a result of that, there are many artists in lots of different media who have taken it upon themselves to create their own sort of custom instruments / devices for making their art. And so Douglas thought it would be an interesting idea to provide a forum for the community of, let's just say, hardware hackers, software hackers, people who are building things, to just get together and show what they've been working on and get some feedback on it, and just talk a little bit about their process, show current work that's been done. And the big idea behind Dorkbot, and one that I'm hoping that we can really sort of maintain, is that it's designed to be a community-oriented group. There's no cost. Anybody can present. Anybody who's working on anything in the city can come and present. So even though it was hosted at Columbia University initially, it eventually began moving to other locations in New York, and it became a big phenomenon. And it was a really interesting and fun grassroots kind of group of people working on interesting stuff, ranging from presentations to workshops to everything you can imagine. So Dorkbot, the idea of Dorkbot began spreading across the world, and now Dorkbots exist in major cities all over North America and Europe, and probably South America too. There's one in Calgary, there's one in Vancouver, there's one in Seattle, and now there's one in Edmonton. We're just getting started. This is our first meeting. So like all community Dorkbots, we're hoping that this group, whatever we end up calling ourselves, well, we know what we're going to call ourselves, but whatever we end up doing with it, the idea is for it to serve the community and to be a resource for people who are working on things. So that said, let me just say a couple of things about frequency of meetings and so forth. We chose this date to get started just because it seemed like a good date when there weren't other things happening on campus. We chose this space because we could get it on this date, and it's here. This is by no means the ultimate home for Dorkbot. We don't know exactly where our home will be ultimately. It works well for us to present it here, to host it here, because it's in our labs, and we've got sort of a little bit of room to do stuff. And we also have rehearsal next door, which we get to listen to and curse over and whatever. But as we grow, and I hope we do, this room will eventually become too small. And so we may move to another room on campus. We may move off campus eventually. I don't know. It's sort of up to whatever we as a group can come up with together. So, but we're willing to host it for as long as we need to here at the university. But I hope that it's not seen as a university function, even though some of us who teach at the university are sort of running it. But I'm hoping that it develops a life of its own, and everybody can feel like they can participate, and that's the idea. So that said, anybody who would like to present in upcoming meetings, just send me an email. If you go to dorkbot.org, you will see a link to the Edmonton Dorkbot page. And that page has an email that you can send for any questions or presentation proposals or anything like that you'd like to do. There's also a mailing list that you can join there. We have a Facebook group. And so just let me know if you have any more questions about that as the evening wears on. We haven't established a weekly or monthly meeting schedule or whatever. It would probably we don't know how frequently we'll meet yet. This is our first. We may not have another one until January, but we may eventually have one every month. Again, it just depends on how many people are involved and want to present. So I'm hoping that we can have a reasonable schedule. Eventually, maybe have it be first Thursday of every month or something like that. But so you'll hear from me whenever we decide to figure out when the next one's going to be, and ultimately, hopefully, we'll have sort of a rotating schedule of dates that we'll know in advance. So tonight we have two presentations. The first is Colin and Dan, who have a band called MUGBAIT, and they're going to talk a little bit about some interfaces that they've been building, some augmented guitar ideas, some new ways of thinking about sonically displaying their music. And that will be followed by a presentation by Colin Henry here, who, along with several colleagues in humanities computing, have developed, has put together an Arduino, and he'll talk about what that is. In particular, they're looking at coming up with a smart way of designing a case for the Arduino that anybody on the internet can learn how to do, and I'll let him explain the details of that. And then after that, we can go out for beer, or we can go home, or whatever we feel like doing. There are a couple of bars across the street. We like to have beer lab after some of our technical classes, so we can do that after Dorkbot. Yeah, I'll turn it over to Colin and Dan. And by the way, I'm sorry about the horrible fluorescent lights in this room. We will correct that with lamps from thrift stores soon. I've been saying that for a while, but I've been asking for help, and no one has brought thrift store lamps. I have one that I'll bring in next time. Colin and Dan.
Hi, thanks for coming out, everybody. So, like Scott said, my name's Colin Labadie. This is Dan Brophy. We are doctoral students here at the university. We're students in composition, so you know, we do the whole composer thing, write instrumental music. But we're also both interested in the guitar. We both grew up playing in different kind of bands, metal, rock, that sort of thing. And then we both did our undergrad where we did the classical guitar thing and even played in a classical guitar quartet together. And then eventually we kind of came back to the electric guitar, and now we're getting interested in ways that we can explore and think about the electric guitar in different ways, and kind of push it and do different things with it. So just to give kind of a brief intro, there's a sort of both a field of research and just a thing that people do called instrument augmentation. Maybe some of you might be familiar with it already, and it's basically any kind of electronic means with which you take an instrument and add to the technique. So that might be a sensor, maybe it's just a knob that you put on, or it might be something more complex like an accelerometer that senses your body movement and the sound of the instrument reacts with you based on that movement. So this has been going on for, I would say, about 25 years or so, 30 years, and it's sort of maybe even longer, but instrument augmentation as such anyway. So Dan and I were playing in this group called MUGBAIT, and this was kind of our playing ground for this kind of stuff. And while we were doing the MUGBAIT thing, we started taking a course with Scott. The course was experimental electronics, and we had to do a final project where it could be anything we wanted so long as it involved electronics and music in some way. So we decided that we were going to kind of use it as an opportunity to try out making prototype augmented guitars. So the way that we're going to do it is I'm going to talk a little bit about how I approached it. He's going to take over and talk about how he approached it, and then we're just going to show you a quick video about how we use it in practice for our group. My guitar, which if you look is this ugly hunk of junk on the floor here. You can see it, and I'll show you some pictures so you'll see. Basically what I'm going to do, I'll tell you a little bit about it. When I was building it, my goal was to basically just have 3 or 4 functional sensors on the guitar. Because it was a prototype and because I only had a couple months, I just wanted to get something on that worked. Something that was on the guitar, got into my laptop, and affected the sound of the guitar. And I didn't want it to be a sort of perfect end product, but it was just some way to get started to kind of dive in at first and sort of learn the issues that come with augmenting instruments. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of just go through chronologically and show you the progression of the project. have a whole bunch of pictures to show you, as well as a couple of videos, and I'll just sort of comment along the way about some of the things that came up. So the first part of the project was to start prototyping with the sensors. So I went out to Active Electronics. I bought half a dozen sensors, and the goal was just to try to get the data from the sensors into my laptop. So can everybody see that okay? So this is an Arduino board. I sort of stuck onto a breadboard. For those of you who don't know what an Arduino is, it's essentially a circuit board that allows you to get electronic data into USB form so that you can get it into, well, you can do a number of things with it. What I want to do is put it into my laptop. You can also go the other way. You can program the chip to do certain things with electronics. That's not a very good definition. Maybe Colin can help me out later. That's as best as I can explain it. So these were just some of the junk. I basically wired up a little button to try to see if I could get it talking to my computer. This doesn't have a clock. This was pretty late in the lab. So a friend of ours brought in a big mixing board into the. It was from the 80s. It had the Moffats written on it, so I think that they used it to record the Moffats.
Actually, when you came in, you might have seen a huge silver case beside the door right there. The mixing board was that big, like one of those ones they use for stadiums and stuff.
So we tore into it, and this is actually just one of the channel strips inside the mixer. And you can see it's got a whole bunch of potentiometers on there that look really fun. So we all kind of had at it and sort of desoldered it and ripped off a whole bunch of pots that would eventually find their way into all of our projects. So if you see anybody that has pots that look like this, you know that they were in Scott's 645 class. Right, so I got the sensor data into the computer and got it running. The next part was to start prototyping on the software end. So I'm using primarily a program called MaxMSP, which most of you may or may not be familiar with. MaxMSP is kind of the lingua franca for electronic musicians. It's a visual programming environment. It works by having objects that you link together in various ways to do various things. The way that I was using it was basically as a control interface for a network of VSTs. So all of the objects along here and all of the objects along here are VSTs, and then I have a matrix that essentially works like a kind of patch bay where I can link together the VSTs in different ways and then control the volumes of each channel depending on how I've linked them together. This was a patch that I was using with MUGBAIT toward the start. The problem was that I was using the mouse constantly because I had to, if I wanted to turn the volume up, I had to come over here and turn the volume up. If I wanted to, make connections, I had to do it like this. So, in watching back on the video, I'm playing the mouse and not really the guitar. You see me all the time with the mouse, but not actually with my hands on the guitar. So, that was kind of the start of wanting to get these sensors on the guitar, so I could start to get my hands back on the guitar and not play the laptop so much. So this is how I sort of cleaned it up a little bit, and this is the same basic patch. And then over here, basically, if you know Max, the VST object will take variables. So basically, you give it a variable, and then you take some kind of numerical value, and you can adjust values within the VST itself. And so what I wanted to do is take all the sensor data from the guitar and map it to the VST parameters. So this is me just kind of playing around trying to find which parameters in the VSTs I like to play with that eventually I would map the sensors onto. And then eventually it sort of evolved. So I figured out really soon that actually the problem was I only had about 3, 4, 5 sensors on the guitar, and so that would only allow me to affect 3, 4, 5 parameters of sound, which wasn't enough. So what I ended up doing was I created a kind of bank system. And what I wanted buttons on the guitar where I could cycle through the banks, and for each bank I would have a separate, it would control a separate set of parameters. So, if I was in the first bank and I turned a pot, it would affect, a parameter on one of the VSTs. But then I could switch over and affect this one through the sensors themselves. And then eventually